changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark, and it's Friend Friday on the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast. And today is going to be one of the most interesting podcasts ever because we're going to talk to Donna Goldberg, who is the daughter of Irene Spencer, who was the second of 10 wives of the polygamist Verlin LeBaron. And Irene actually wrote a story for our new book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Dreams and the Unexplainable. And unfortunately, she sent us the story and then she died recently. So her daughter, Donna Goldberg, is here today to talk about her mother's miraculous love story that's in our Dreams and the Unexplainable book. And we're also going to talk about her mother's life and how she left this sect of the Mormon Church and Donna's own life as the second of her father's 58 children. So let me first tell you about Donna. Donna Goldberg is a mother of 4, and she's an inspirational speaker and writer. And her mom, Irene, was the New York Times bestselling author of Shattered Dreams and Cult Insanity, and we're going to talk about that. Donna's uncle, Ervil LeBaron, was the infamous Mormon prophet, and Donna was the eldest of her mother's 13 children that she had with Verlin LeBaron, who was the brother of Ervil. I mean, these names, I don't know. I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I feel like I'm in that world all of a sudden. Donna left the LeBaron colony at age 18 and moved to L.A., and she actually ended up converting to Christianity and now is married to a Jewish man, hence the last name Goldberg. Donna, I can't wait to talk to you today. Welcome to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast. And also, I do want to extend my sympathy to you for the loss of your mother, which I understand because my mother died earlier this year as well.
I couldn't be more honored than to be, on here because of my precious mom. She was an amazing, amazing inspiration and woman. And I'm just happy to be here today.
Let's start off talking about your mother's amazing story in Chicken Soup for the Soul, Dreams and the Unexplainable. Her story is called It Begins with an H. And let's just go through that story together. Do you want to tell the story to our audience?
Wow. Well, my mom was very intuitive, and she had a lot of different things happen to her over her life that were nothing short of miracles. And when they had a call out for stories about miracles and the unexplainable, I immediately said, Mom, let's submit a couple of your stories. And so back a year ago, September 2016, we submitted the story. And unfortunately, Mom had a lot of health issues. And before we ever heard back from you, she passed away in March. But the story is just unbelievable. My mom was my dad's second wife of 10 women, and she had 14 of his 58 children. And he was killed in a tragic car accident it was in August of 81. And my mom remained single for quite some time. She was only, I believe, 47 at the time of his death. She was very lonely, and she cried out to God in prayer, just saying, I don't want to be alone. Who is there for me? And she said, as clear as a bell, she heard like a voice say, his name begins with an H. And for months and several months, she would go to restaurants. Wherever she was at, she would be doodling and thinking of anybody that had a name with an H. Well, she didn't know too many people, but she had Harvey, Will, Hugh, you name it. And time continued to go on, and she got lonely. And in the meantime, her girlfriend, Jenny, her son was supposed to go to England with her. And she said, Irene, I have an extra ticket. My son can't go. Would you like to go? So Mom went over to England and just enjoyed herself quite a bit. One evening they were out listening to romantic music and having dinner, and she said she just had pangs of loneliness and just a great desire to have a companion. And they went back to Jenny's home. They were staying with Jenny's mother in England. And she said, as she was getting undressed and going to bed, the last thing she cried out and said, God, who is there for me? I thought of everyone. And in the middle of the night, like maybe 2 a.m, she said she had this vivid dream where Hector J. Spencer came to her in a dream, and he just kind of gave a cute little smile and said, you haven't thought of me. And she woke up. She's all the way in England, and she remembered an old friend of the family's that she hadn't thought of in years. He had been gone, but she also knew that his wife and him had divorced and had been divorced for maybe a couple of years. Just she had heard this, but she said she knew that God had answered her prayer, and she could not wait to get home. So she gets back to America and takes her best friend out to lunch. And her girlfriend's telling her, you need to move on with your life, Irene. I've got a book here. You need to just, you deserve love and you need to move on. And she goes, well, I don't need the book. And I already know I am moving on. And it was just really funny because her girlfriend says, well, who is it? And she goes, honestly, I can't tell you because he doesn't even know. And she goes, Irene, come on, I'm your best friend. So after a bit of, she said, well, if you promise not to tell a soul, because if this doesn't pan out, it would be humiliating. Long story short, she reveals that it's Hector J. Spencer, and her girlfriend just looked at her and said, oh my gosh. She goes, I believe you guys would make an excellent couple. I used to be his neighbor years ago. And she proceeded to tell her that his young daughter had just won Miss Preteen Utah. And my mom said, and she encouraged my mom, she goes, that's the very excuse you're going to use to call this man, is you're going to congratulate him and see where it goes from there. My mom was never at a loss for words. That when she got his phone number and made the call, she said it took a couple of seconds, and finally she's like, yes. And they talked for a couple hours on the phone, and before just reminiscing about old times and catching up on each other's lives and hearing about her trip. And just before they hang up, he said, Irene, I come to San Diego quite often, and I was just wondering, would you like to have lunch sometime? And my mom said that would be lovely. The next day, she didn't put this in the story, but the next day he was at my sister's front door where my mom was staying, and they ended up going out to Denny's, I believe it was. They stayed there till like midnight, just singing together, crying together, reminiscing together. Within just a few months, they were married. In fact, couple of my sisters go, Mom, don't you think that's way too fast? And Mom says, I'm not getting any younger. At my age, you got to act fast, because if I think too much, most people think and regret that they ever get married. She goes, I'm doing this. Long story short, they were married 25 years. They celebrated 25 years of an amazing marriage. We adored him. Mom's kids loved him. I always say, I've never met a man that anyone can hold a candle to like Hector J. Spencer. He was kind. He was compassionate. He was just so opposite my mom. My mom is like me, loud. Well, we're just kind of all full of enthusiasm and talk loud. I don't know if it's because there were so many of us, we never could get a word in edgewise, but she and him complimented each other, and he adored her 25 years later. And the dream was, she told it to us. I mean, everyone knew this before it ever happened and after it happened. And unfortunately, he passed away at 89, and now they're both together. She passed away at 80. And I loved when I opened the book and saw that she was on page 180. It was just like, wow, easy to remember. And I'm just so thrilled. I feel like she's being published from heaven, and I love it. So
I'm so happy to do that. And I love the story. It's so cool that she heard a voice telling her she was going to marry a man whose name started with H, and then it worked out so well. So now, I don't know why I had read you were one of 13 children, but then it also says, you said you're one of 14 children. So tell me about your mom's marriage.
Yes.
She was raised like a regular member of the Church of Latter-day Saints in Utah.
Yes, I will tell you. She was actually born into a fundamentalist polygamist. It was the fundamentalists that never gave up on polygamy. So they were a sect of their own, because the Mormons of today, of course, don't like to even mention the word polygamy. And although their prophet started this years ago, and my parents and family members always felt that God was unchangeable. And if he gave the orders through Joseph Smith to live polygamy, that it would, it should remain true today. So when my mother was born, she's the 13th of 31 children. Her father, my grandfather, had 4 wives living in the same house in Utah at the time of my mother's birth. And this is all she ever knew. It was programmed into her brain, and just, this is what you do to make it to heaven. It was supposed to be a higher, law, and they were to have all the babies that one could have. As long as a woman was fertile, they were expected to have babies. So my mother actually married my father as his second wife, and her half-sister, they both had the same father, married my father first. But my mother had the most children. She gave birth to 13 single births, but she also adopted a little girl that became her 9th child that was only 12 hours old. And so nobody, the children that were born after her could hardly believe it, because she just was a part of our life, and my dad accepted, and they, she was ours. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, she passed away of breast cancer back in 2000. But my mom, she was my mama's girl, little Sandra.
Yeah. Wow. So she was the second of 10 wives. She had 14 children of her husband's 58 children. And then how did she come to decide to leave? Oh, he died, right? And then she left? Or did she leave while he was still alive?
She had left him for 2 or 3 years. She had just gotten to a point in her life. Her actual best friend, Priscilla, who became the 10th wife, decided to marry my father. And it just threw her over the edge. She was her confidant, her best friend, and nothing she could do would stop Priscilla from marrying my dad. So she left, and my aunt, who was not religious and lived in Las Vegas, took her in. She had a little mother-in-law's quarters, 2-bedroom little house, and she let my mother move in there with 7 of her children. At that point, many of the kids were up in their teens, and I had already left and gotten married. So my mom went back to Las Vegas, took a few courses on writing, and just started trying to pursue her own life. And she was gone, but the younger kids wanted to go back to Mexico so bad. They missed their dad, they missed the family. And my mom actually, it was crazy, but she was told by 2 different people that she should go back to Mexico. She was so desperate. My aunt, that's not religious, took her to a psychic. And the psychic, they didn't know my mother from Adam, said, Irene, you need to go back to Mexico. Within 1 year, you will know why. And my mom hadn't even told her she was from Mexico. And true to that psychic's word, my dad was killed almost to the day a year later, and set my mom free from all of the turmoil and the anguish and the pain. And it was after that. But I was actually the first one to leave. I left at 18, and it wasn't hard to leave. I was so fed up with the poverty. There was no limit to the amount of wives a man could have. If, at their whim, they could take in another woman. And our poverty got deeper. My mom never owned a checking account. She, her social, sexual, spiritual, every kind of need was unfulfilled. And my dad ended up marrying 2 of my best friends. I grew up with these girls. They were my slumber party girls, best friends. One at the, I say, ridiculous young age of 15, but that was common for them to do. My dad married my 15-year-old girlfriend, Susan, and then my 19-year-old friend, Lily. And when I say friends, they were my BFFs. And so you can only imagine how weird that was. All of a sudden, they're sleeping with my dad. And Lily ended up having 6 children with my father, and Susan had 5. She eventually left because, there was no way he could make any of them happy. It was just, he was always putting out fires. He was gone a lot. He was in the States most of the time, working as a painter in Las Vegas, trying to just put food in our mouths. He would come home sometimes after 2 or 3 months of all these lonely women being left, just having baby and pregnant most of the time. He'd come home with truckloads of hand-me-down clothes, just old toys from the secondhand stores, and we thought it was Christmas. So for most of my life, I would say 85% of my life was with no running water, no electricity, no inside toilets, nothing. In fact, I just returned yesterday. I went down to Mexico, where my family, a lot of them still reside there. And yes, polygamy is still practiced there, but it's very much on the lowdown. Most of the children, their parents have been, and how it hasn't worked. So there's not that many practicing polygamy today. But I went back, and my birthday was October 6th. So I was reminiscing and telling my siblings, there was 24 of them there from the different wives, and they threw me a nice steak out, and everybody had like a potluck, and it was just really sweet. It was the last time I celebrated my birthday in Mexico with my polygamous family was when I was 7 years old.
Wow. So I have a question for you.
In that town.
I'm reading the Wikipedia about your mother. Is all this stuff true?